Today, we're here specifically, again, to harp on probably like one of the best things that we have on our shelf and one of the things that we're the most proud of, and that's HyphaLink Nourish. So we have a couple different formulations of the product here with us today, which some of you may already be familiar with and some of you may not. We have our all-natural formulation. We have our CO, which is our certified organic, as well as our HyphaLink Nourish FE, which is with chelated iron. Now, we have done some deep dives on this product with you before, but it's got such a complex nature and such a complex story as to how it came about and how we got to where we are today, that it makes a lot of sense to produce different pieces of content to highlight different aspects of the product, exactly what it is, what it does, and why, and what it does for you. So the course of this conversation generally is going to be, we're going to focus on two things mostly. We're going to focus on value, as far as how much are you actually getting pound per pound for your dollar, whether you're right here in our backyard in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or whether you live in Lancaster, California. And the other thing that we're going to hit on hard is going to be drought stress, because we saw a lot of it last year in our neck of the woods, and we are discovering very quickly that that is one circumstance, one element of stress where HyphaLink Nourish really shines in a big way. So would you tell us a little bit about the product? I think they've heard some of it from me already, but what is Nourish in a nutshell?
Well, Nourish started a solid 40 years ago when I was tank mixing all sorts of different ingredients, organic ingredients. Seems like a long time, 40 blows me away, but the ingredients were all liquid for a very long time. And I would add things and say, it's a little much, or maybe that's not enough. And I would look at the results that I would get. So it took years and years to assess the results of this product and of all the ingredients. And I would not layer more than one thing at a time, because I would always want to see what the one thing did and how that change played out. And so then we got to the place where we were making Influence, which is a liquid concentrated version of Nourish. We had a parcel carrier, if you will, names not being mentioned, that would destroy the liquid shipments. And it was just really nerve ending, you know, like I just couldn't handle it. So I had to start deciding how to formulate this all in a dry formula. So Nourish slowly started to take shape, if you will. We just kind of got it better and better and better and better and better. And intuition plays a large role in that, because that's the gift that I bring to the table, is observing and tweaking and, you know, playing it out. But there was one other thing though, and hold one second. The weight of the product, the liquid product, was also costing a lot to ship, and liquid is water weight. And so we moved in a direction of making this formula so that we could bring the cost of shipping down and reach across the country to, say, Lancaster, California, and do it in an economically viable manner, where liquid, that would never fly. So
it doesn't. Even if you have a really fantastically good product, if somebody's paying you know, a large percentage of what the product is worth just in shipping alone, that's a barrier to entry, period. Mm-hmm. So it turns a product that would be very successful all the way around the nation or internationally into a little bit more of a regional deal, unless you want to reach into your pocket because you just want it that bad. So that's one problem that this definitely solves. Now, but is this a fertilizer?
No, it's not. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm going to segue to that in just 2 seconds, but I wanted to add to the fact that the other reason that this soluble powder version came about was, which you know because you've been around forever, but the reason it came about is because the Influence product had a limited shelf life. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a biologically active product, so eventually, once all the quasi-dormant microbes would utilize the dissolved oxygen in the liquid, slowly but surely the product would go anaerobic, and slowly but surely it'd start to grow what we refer to as floaties. And so, you know, you can't sell that to a client with good conscience. And we would literally waste product. We would literally throw it away, and we were just dumping money down a drain because things went bad. And sometimes they'd go bad faster, sometimes they'd go bad more slowly. So you can never predict it.
And that's really the whole industry too, because, and I've seen it across the country, from tree care products all the way to the local hydro store or whatever. But if somebody is trying to sell you a highly biological liquid concentrate that does have a very long shelf life, then it's not as biological as they're trying to tell you that it is in the first place. So that's a good indicator right there. Short shelf life is an indicator of the product actually being of very, very high quality. But to be able to replicate that in a soluble powder format that you can make your own sprayable mix at your rates that you're going out into the field, you can make a liquid concentrate if you so choose to, but the shelf life here, as opposed to the liquid concentrate, is indefinite, again, as long as you don't get it wet. So you can take it, you can put it up on the shelf in your garage, and you can reach for that powder in 10 years the same way that you could today.
Yeah, and keep it sealed because humidity can get in there as well.
Humidity is moisture.
But so yeah, it just is really has a lot of very strong attributes. And back to your question, which was a good question, which is it a fertilizer? The answer is no. And so in the industry, everybody kind of refers to a product like this as a complex biostim product, which is abbreviated for complex biostimulant product. And a biostimulant, really by definition, the way I use it anyway, is something that will affect the energy of a plant one way or another, but will also be a phenomenal biological food, or as you'll hear me say, biological food substrate. So the idea is to create a product that feeds living organisms and feeds them in such a way that they impart their living energetic value or frequency, if you will, to the plants that are that they are congregating around or on. And so this product right here, which I didn't really figure out until this past January. The product's been around a lot longer, but I didn't figure out how I wanted to describe it to people until this past January. And there are a number of reasons why. But I would call this the whole food supplement, which I think you've shared with some folks. Whole food supplement for plants and soils and microbes.
And the reason that that makes a lot of sense to me anyway is because I know back when I was in college and I was taking microbiology, we would grow out pathogens. We would grow out bacteria and stuff. We would usually do it on an agar plate, you know, so whether you have some kind of yeast substrate or whether you're growing it on like a simple sugar, what we learned there was that the selection of the food source helps you select for the organisms that you want to grow in the environment. And if you're specifically trying to target beneficial soil, fungi, and bacteria, and the things that you want to have in a good organic complex soil structure, you're going to want to select for, again, the specific types of food substrates that they crave, being in this specifically and especially complex carbon structures in the form of high quality soluble humic acids and a whole lot of other things. So that's just one element of what Nourish is and how it kind of serves the soil microbiology. But then there's microbiology on the surface of the leaf as well. There's microbiology inside the plant tissues. So you can do soil drenches, you can do foliar work. And the whole time that you're bringing that biological consortium back in, you're refining and you're making efficient not only the metabolism of the plant, but also the metabolism of the soil that the plant shares its space with and that it gets its resources and its nutrients from. So when you make the most basic life cycles of the plant more efficient, you often find that you actually require less inputs on the back end, especially synthetic fertilizer inputs and NPK and macronutrients in general. So is Nourish really a foundation for a larger program that does include macronutrition, or is it a standalone product, or is it both?
Well, I mean, I guess the basic way to explain that, at least from my perspective, is, you know, were people growing all their crops with fertilizers 200 years ago?
No.
And the reason they weren't is because they weren't killing off microbial life with pesticides and salt-based fertilizers. Therefore, microbial life was flourishing around their crops, and they were able to have a complex, biologically antagonistic system where the microbes were all flourishing, they were all defecating, leaving little microbial poops, you know, as nutritional uptake, and then they were having hand-to-hand combat with pathogens. And if you understand the biological world, 90% of your biological life is beneficial and 10% of it is pathogenic or harmful.
So by having the beneficials there and having a big, robust population of them, you're not only reinforcing the digestive tract of the soil that is literally eating and excreting and making more bioavailable all of the resources and the nutrients that the plant needs to survive, but you're also bolstering the competition against the bad pathogens and the diseases and stuff that you want to keep out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're literally doing biological chelation of micronutrients. The microbial communities are adding to the weathering of rock, and therefore releasing micronutrients and trace elements from the rock. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So the idea is, do you try to control the natural systems so that you, with this amazing intellect that humans supposedly have, are you trying to control a particular outcome, or are you trying to enable a beautiful system that is already at work and trying to do its thing without our interference? And so Nourish was really my way of saying, I think we just need to enable that beautiful thing out there that is doing its work already, as opposed to stepping on its head.
Well, we've already stepped on its head. So through many years of conventional agriculture and using salt-based pesticides and salt-based nutrition and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, we've killed that biology. So in order to get the metabolism and the system of the soil and the plant all back firing on all cylinders, we have to find a way to replace that, I guess, to remediate it. Would you say that a product like HyphaLink Nourish is actually capable of bioremediating soils that are suffering?
It is not it itself does not bioremediate, but what it does is it jump starts the engine that does the bioremediation. And so, I always say when I'm talking with people on the phone, you can't have life without life. And so if you want a qualitative crop performance, you need life. You need microbial life, which is supposed to be down there. So how do you get it? You set the table. And you set the table with really well-chosen biological food substrates.
It's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come.
If you build it, they will come. If you set a buffet table with wonderful foods that are all healthy and nutritious, you're going to build a great team of people to work with. If you just have everybody eating off of a table full of cake and candy and soda pop, it's not going to work so well, because people are going to get pretty lethargic and, have a sugar crash. So back to your point, though, that you know, the types of biological food substrates, if they are all carefully chosen and they are all really just healthy, you can really build a team, a good, healthy team of players. And, you know, not all the players eat the same thing. So it's important to have a lot of different ingredients, and then they need to be working together and synergizing one another, because see, the way this product performs, it doesn't do it because of any one ingredient or even two ingredients. It does it because of 25 ingredients, give or take, that are actually synergizing one another. So they're literally
It's
like
an entourage,
lifting each other up.
entourage effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's what I love about that product. And you know, it kind of smacked me in the head, because I thought I was doing a good thing, but I didn't realize that it was going to be
As good as
that
it is.
good.
Yeah.
And so we got lucky once.
So, well, more than once, but yeah.
No, I know, but I'm saying
But this is a
luck
good
is hard to
one. This
come
is a
by.
good one. And it makes my job easier when I go and use it in plant health care and tree care out in the field. But on that note, like, we've talked a lot about what it's doing for soils, and then what it's doing for the plant via what it's doing for soils. But sometimes I'll go out with this and I'll just go foliar, you know, and if I'm only making a stress reducer application and I'm looking for no fertility in the middle of summertime, I may use Nourish as a standalone product without anything else really going on in my tank mix. And I have found visually, if I'm out on a hot summer day and I have a hydrangea, which is obviously a very, very fleshy plant, and it's laying down and it's sad and it doesn't have enough water and it's suffering from drought stress, literally. But then I'll come along and I'll make a foliar application with Nourish and nothing but Nourish. And if I walk back past that same bed patch that I just sprayed, 20 to 40 minutes later, those leaves are very erect.
Yep.
They are very vigorous. So what's the mode of action? If that's not going through the soil and over time, and it's working so effectively and so quickly to perk that plant up, how is it doing that just to the plant tissue? Optimizing photosynthesis?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think there are a number of things coming together at the same time, to be very honest with you. And back to your 20 or 30 or 40 minutes later, I try to under promise and over deliver. So I generally tell people, you know, 2.5 hours later, and it's absolutely noticeable. There's no question about it. And hydrangea is a great example.
It's the best. Other than like
well,
an annual, like a petunia, it's pretty
I've
good
heard
too.
cannabis growers say the same thing. But you know, so long story short, you know, I didn't use the word by accident earlier when I said frequency. When something, when you eat a wonderful meal and you get good rest, I mean really good rest, and you're not stressed to the hilt, and it's a sunny day and everything comes together and the stars align, generally speaking, you feel really good. Mm-hmm. Well, there are a couple of things that brought that together, right? So, you know, it was a sunny day and you got a lot of sleep and so on and so forth. If you could create a supplement for mankind that did the same thing, mm-hmm. You'd be batting 1,000. By the way, we're working on that. And it'll be out shortly. Give me another 6 months. But that said, this is that whole food supplement for plants and soils and microbes, and it works in just that way. It strikes at the vitality of the plant, an energetic frequency, the vitality, you know, so everything's kind of coming together, the stars are aligning. The ingredients, of course, are all adding their own nuances of benefits, but they are also collaborating together. Mm-hmm. And you know, how's that? A rising tide
lifts all ships.
Thank you. And so that's what's happening in this bag. You know, to be very honest. And for me to sit here, I'd probably have to be 10 hours into this thing to be able to tell you what every ingredient is doing and how I think it's leveraging the ingredient beside it. You know, there is an element of faith that people are going to have. And if you try it, you'll like it.
But the good food conversation is so critical because it puts into common language something that otherwise seems very heady, acidic, high frequency, and complex.
Oh, yeah.
And so like when I go out and I eat a piece of venison backstrap that I took with my bow in the woods on the farm, or when I have a good tuna steak, that stuff hits my gut and I want to go. I want to go lift weights. I want to go work outside. You go and you eat half a pizza and you want to take a nap and watch Netflix on the couch. So it's very different things. But what you get in, or what you put in is what you get out. But again, going back to the food conversation, that's a curious one because a lot of people talk about fertilizer, NPK, macronutrients as being plant food. But that is a fallacy in and of itself because plants do not eat nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus.
Nope.
They are components that the plant requires to some extent to be able to fire up photosynthesis, to grab water and sunlight and carbon dioxide and smash them together in the leaf and create photosynthate carbohydrate sugars. So those sugars that the plant creates using these materials, that's plant food. So I would say that products like these, with the many layers of complexity that they have, and really not a whole lot of macronutrition, but micros and good beneficial traces, biological food substrates, that's the good food that's not food. But what it's doing is it's optimizing the photosynthesis. It's optimizing the metabolism of the plant so that it can work at a higher level, maybe even with a little bit less.
So what is a cake? A cake is carbohydrate sugars, basically.
Yep.
Carbohydrate sugars.
It is.
And what is photosynthesis producing? It is producing photosynthate carbohydrate sugars.
But a cake is not only 3 ingredients.
No, I agree with that. But so what happens if you take I'll call it an anemic cake that is, you know, your carbohydrate sugars. It's anemic. It doesn't have a lot of nutrition. But what if you could like prime the chloroplast and prime the photosynthetic pump and production capacity with a whole food supplement that is literally upping the game of that cake production to the point where your cake was actually healthy for you. And that is exactly what we're doing with the plant. We're collaborating with the microbial world and we're saying, let's all work together and let's up the game of photosynthesis so that we have a really healthy photosynthetic carbohydrate sugar. And that is going to up the vitality game as well. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that's, again, in a nutshell, what this is doing. So that's why you can use it. That's the beauty of it. That's the thing that, again, slapped me upside the back of the head, was if you really actually achieve that result, which we have, if you achieve it, it will work on virtually every plant because it is speaking to very fundamental life as we know it, energy as we know it, vitality as we know it, nutritional well-being as we know it. If you do that for your own body, you're better off. And if everybody did the same thing, we'd all be better off. And so it works on a very fundamental level. And which, I'm sorry, but I got to go back to your question because you asked the right question a long time ago, which was, so is this a fertilizer? Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to that, and I want to, if I didn't already say it, and if I did, I apologize, but if I were left with one product to use, let's say, you know, the calamity happened, you know, everything collapsed, okay, and we had to grow all our own food and whatever it was, we were going to have a couple flowers in our planter box out front and try to be happy in this world. I'd want this product.
If you had only one thing.
If I had only one thing, I'd want this product
I would agree.
because it's not an NPK, and in fact, if you pump too much NPK, what do you end up with? A lot of soft-bodied insects and diseases. So you're literally changing the frequency to a sick plant. And the sick plant is giving off these energetic frequencies that are saying, here I am, come get me. Where a healthy plant's going,
that's the bully analogy. The bully in high school never picks on the linebacker from the football team.
Right.
It picks on, the younger, weaker kid who doesn't stand up for himself or have so many friends. And so when you do treat a plant poorly, and when you create an unhealthy plant that does not have complexity to its structure, to its life, and to its vital functions, it is susceptible. It is far more susceptible. But when you create a robust plant, and when you create a community and it has defenses, since pests are bullies, since they are opportunists by nature, they don't want to have to work too hard for it. They want it to be pretty easy. And they're going to pick on the weak every time. So I feel like we've kind of at this point answered the is it a fertilizer question, which the answer is no. However, it does increase the plant's ability to get food on its own. To make food and to acquire resources that might be available in the soil to optimize photosynthesis. So what that tells me then, from the outside looking in or the inside looking out, in this case, is if it's not a fertilizer, but it helps the plant in all those ways, then do you need fertilizer? And I'm speaking specifically about NPK, whether it's organic or whether it's synthetic and salt-based. Obviously, we want to stay away from that as much as we can because it kind of cripples our biology. But some people don't have an option. Some people have to use it to some extent or another, whether it be cost basis or they're doing acreage or whatever. So do we need fertilizer if we're using Nourish? Is it a standalone product, or is it the foundation for a larger program?
Well, I think that depends on the grower, to be very honest with you, and what each independent grower is looking for in terms of their productivity. So what I would say is, let's try to answer, because there were a lot of questions in there. Let's try to layer this thing out. So the first answer is, can it stand on its own independently in a tank mix and perform well? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. Now, if I am a grower where I know an agricultural grower, a veggie grower, and I know that I need an extra kick of calcium or magnesium sulfate, okay, meaning Epsom salt, and a lot of good veggie growers know right when to use things like that, like boron or mag sulfate or whatever, then of course you're going to augment some sort of quote unquote fertilizer on top of this, because
it's a requirement of your crop.
And you might be specifically boron deficient. But here's the kicker, and this is really important, and I might say this a couple times throughout this conversation, but when you have this as your foundation in the tank mix, it's now going to make the, let's say, magnesium sulfate far more efficient, far more effective, such that you will not need to use anywhere near as much magnesium sulfate, because this is the tide that is raising all the ships, right? Yep. So the rising tide that is lifting up all the ships. So it does that with calcium. Calcium can react with this. If you don't have agitation, it loves to grab calcium, and it makes it look like the La Brea tar pits, if you will, at the bottom of your tank mix. But if you have good agitation, you've now got this beautifully chelated calcium, and it is super highly efficient. And you're like, well, it looked like, at the bottom of my tank, but when I agitated it, it did great,
That's another reason why it works so well with iron. I mean, in our Nourish FE product, we only have a 1% concentration of chelated iron. You're going to see that that's lower than some labeled rates of other, somewhat similar products within the industry. But that's because it works as a carrier, not only into the soil, but also into the plant, because you have with your complex carbons that are coming from highly complex, soluble, high quality humic and fulvic acids, you have humic and fulvic acid molecular structures there. Fulvic acid specifically is like the Trojan horse of like anything that you want to get into the plant. It actually is so small and so complex with all of its open ionic bonding sites that make it electrically charged to all the other things that you might want to use, that it can actually go, is it inter or intracellular?
Meaning
intracellular.
intra is within, so
Into the cell of the plant.
yes,
Even with
through
the
the cell
rigid
wall,
structure.
which would be between the lipid structures of the cell wall. But I like to say, instead of just the Trojan horse, the fulvic molecule is the, like if you think about carpentry when you're building a house, okay, and you think about stick framing and that sort of thing, like someone who's a great stick framer or frames barns like the Amish do, they can slap it all up. It does not have to look exceptionally pretty. It just has to do the job. It's a good framer is a good framer. And you know, they just know what they're doing. They know how to choose the lumber. They know how to slap it together. But that framer isn't going to make a great finish carpenter when you're starting to do the trim on the inside of the living room or the dining room or the whatever.
At least not with the same tools.
Right, exactly. It's not to say that you can't have a carpenter that's great at both, but generally speaking in the trades, they kind of
Specialize.
go to their corners and specialize. And the humic and fulvic acid molecules are very much the same way. The brute in the room is the humic acid molecule, does a lot of heavy lifting. It's a larger molecule. It's got more ion exchange sites, you know, and it is just by percentage alone in natural ore, it's so much more prevalent that it's moving all this stuff around. And then when you need the finesser, the finisher, to tweak it and get it into that cell, the humic ain't going to do it. It's the fulvic that does it. So when you need to take it all the way home, humic hands off to the fulvic and the fulvic does the rest.
So then the ability of a product like HyphaLink Nourish to act as a carrier and to increase the absorption or the bioavailability of some of your other inputs that you might have, does that extend also to macronutrition? Does that extend to your NPK, whether it's organic or whether it's salt-based? Because in my mind, if this product is a carrier and if it helps you use less, if you're a turf guy or if you're in agriculture, any grower it's true for, but the more square footage and the more acreage that you're trying to cover, especially if you're just doing foliar work, because you don't have the capacity to put the volume out to be able to get a really good drench, can we save a lot of money on our conventional or on our organic NPK inputs at the same time having this in the tank?
It really, I mean, I know you're asking that question, and there's an answer I want to give, which would in theory sell more product, but the honest response is, sorry to beat you up on it, but
that's what this is about.
But the honest response is that every grower has an axe to grind, whether they're growing turf in a lawn or they're doing field crops, meaning field corn and soybean. You know, at the end of the day, they have a goal they need to reach, and it's all about input cost.
Yes.
So their inputs are the materials they use, the products they use throughout the year. That's their input cost. And you go to a grain farmer and he knows how many dollars he's going to spend per acre per year. And you've got to work within the confines of those dollars. If you don't, he doesn't sell his crop or he goes broke. So when you get into that situation, and I'm just trying to be clear about how we make a claim or jag people up a little bit. But this, if you go with the soluble humate powder, a straight soluble humate powder, and you let an ag grower that's doing field crops, just give it to them and say, reduce your NPK, just use this catalyst to make your NPK more effective. Now, what you just did was you gave them a low-cost ingredient to take their higher cost ingredients, minimize those, and you used a low cost ingredient to do it. Now what you just did was you made room in their budget per acre.
Right.
And so when you make room in the budget per acre, now all of a sudden, little bit by little bit, you can introduce health and vitality and well-being to their regimen, but you don't do it all at once. You got to help the growers who are trying to make 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 acres work. They're trying to make it work so they can still feed their family. So it's critical that you start them out with one tool, let them see, and again, remember how I said I layered this up, ingredient after ingredient after ingredient over many years. You essentially have to do that same thing with a large scale farmer. Now,
absolutely.
Now, to your point though, can this be used to replace fertilizers in situations where they're just dumping too much on to begin with? And the answer is yes. I mean, I've literally seen veggie growers now use this as 75% of their entire program because they're seeing that they can not only grow a dark green foliage on those veggie crops, whether they're tomatoes or they're potatoes or they're peas or whatever.
Where does the dark green come from?
It's the chloroplast.
The density?
Yeah.
So the darker green the leaf is, literally the more chloroplast it has?
Well, not the more chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll.
But yeah, so, but the chlorophyll is the nutritional density.
Right.
And this is a whole food supplement. So the whole point is to increase nutritional density. And when people go at a crop, as an example, if you're a home gardener and you just want your family to eat a highly nutritious food, what are you going to do? Grow with N, P, and K, meaning nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Is that all you're going to grow with? Because that's pretty anemic food, right? But if you grow with something that's got 25 plus or minus ingredients in it, you're really improving the nutritional density. And now your children are getting micronutrients and trace elements when they eat out of that garden.
And I would say you could probably charge a bit more for that crop as well, because it's going to stand out against everything else that isn't as highly nutritional dense on the shelf.
You could charge more, yes, or you could, instead of trying to just educate everybody what you and I are sitting here rambling about today, the grower might just know that he's able to put that crop out for the same price he did before.
And it's better.
It's better, but it required less input costs because it was a healthier crop and he didn't need all the insecticides, the fungicides, etc.
So there's two ways to put more money in your pocket. You can either charge more or you can spend less.
That's what I'm not good at, is boiling things down like you do.
Now I think we have covered at least enough for today, whether this is a standalone product or whether it works cohesively with other products in your tank mix. The answer was both, depending on what you're doing, because different crops and different growers obviously have different requirements, but it is a very strong product in circumstances on its own, certain specific circumstances. So I'm going to tie back into our little comment on the hydrangea and in the middle of summertime when we're dealing with drought stress, because drought stress is an area where this provides even more value, I think, than normal as specifically a stress reducer. Now, HyphaLink Nourish, biostimulant products, whole food supplements, they work as a stress reducer for a lot of different kinds of stress. There's acute stress and there's chronic stress. And in the human body, stress generally rears its ugly head in the form of inflammation, which then knocks your immune system down, reduces your ability to metabolize your food and get a lot of energy out of it. Again, you're just not firing on all cylinders. But one of the most frequent use cases where I'll use Nourish and only Nourish alone in my tank mix is in the middle of summertime, when I especially don't want to push things, because if a plant is already hurting so much from drought stress, it's trying to conserve its energy. It's trying to conserve its energy for basic life functions. All your spring growth ideally has already hardened off. The cuticle isn't going to lose as much moisture as a tender young spring leaf would. And it's more susceptible to that sun and the heat and everything else. So I'll go out there just with Nourish, whereas in the spring or in the fall, maybe I do have a little bit of fertility, ideally organic fertility, you know, proteins, amino complexes, complex things. Maybe I'll reach for a little fish or something like that. More micronutrients. Sometimes I add additional micronutrients, although I know that there are some micros in this package. But why does Nourish work so well on its own in the summertime? And why specifically does it work for drought stress? Because last year we got hit hard. We got hammered. I think the whole entire state did, and a lot of the eastern seaboard. So what makes this product shine when plants are thirsty?
Well, you started to scratch the surface of it when you said plants kind of draw in, so to speak, when they're under drought stress. And I wanted to add to that when you said that really what happens is some of the most basic functions begin to not function.
Almost like a dormancy.
They're shutting down.
It's like you have winter dormancy after senescence.
If everything's operating at 100% because it's all happy,
Right.
and then things get stressed. Stress simply means that some of those 100% functional things are going to start dropping down to 90 and 80 and 70, and depending on how bad things get, lower. But when that happens, you might not get that fruit production on that citrus tree, or you might not get that tomato production, and in many cases, anyone listening to this knows when they've had bad years like that, you get very poor yield, period. I mean, it can really suffer a lot. So when you say, how is this assisting? Again, there are 25 different products. So each one of those different ingredients is assisting in its own way. But then because it's working with the other 24, one ingredient's working with the other 24 ingredients, now there's that rising tide, so to speak. And so that's part of what's going on. But if you just wanted to take one example, just one example, the humic and fulvic molecules are, they have an affinity for water. And so they hold water, but they also know when to release it. So there's an old term in the industry called field capacity. And that's when your soil gets saturated with water to the point where the soil can no longer hold water, so it dumps it. And, so field capacity, humic and fulvic molecules kind of have their own intuitive knowledge of how to manage water. So let's just call them kind of the backbone water managers of this product. So they're making water wetter. They're making water more efficient. But then all the other ingredients are making the use of what water is available more efficient.
And that goes back to the optimization of the photosynthesis and the metabolism of the plant, because if you are firing on all cylinders, you don't necessarily always need as much.
That's right.
You just need quality.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So less is more.
And this is what the product is doing. HyphaLink Nourish. It's what it's doing.
It's literally helping the plant to ration water in a drought.
Basically, yes. Yep.
And a lot of that probably has to do with, charges, electrical charges of things like the humic and fulvic acid molecules working cohesively with everything else that's in the package.
And it does, but there's like this whole other, like you could spin this off for hours. And another one that's a sideliner that nobody really takes the time to think about is if you create a living, like a thriving living community outside the roots, or on the surface of the leaves, what do these community organisms do? They release what are called microbial exudates. And the way I explain it to people on the phone when I'm talking with them is, if you've ever seen a slug go across the sidewalk.
It leaves that slime trail.
That slime trail. And that slime trail is...
I know a few politicians who do that too.
Yeah, that's a definite. But we should probably veer away from that one for the moment. But the slug is leaving a large microbial exudate. It's just big enough that you can visualize it in your mind's eye, if you will. Where if you have 1 billion microbes in a cubic inch of healthy soil, which is really your target. Yeah, it's not big. It's the size of a golf ball, rounded.
Ice cube, yeah.
Squared.
Yep.
It's a golf ball squared.
Billion microbes.
But if you have that 1 billion microbes and they're all releasing microbial exudates, then you are holding water and managing water in a drought. And that's another reason why you want a biologically dynamic soil.
And it goes, this is even just like big picture, very simple to grasp. But if you're just constantly hammering salt-based NPK and herbicides and fungicides and insecticides and you're killing off all the biology in your soil, then you don't have soil, you're left with dirt. And dirt, something that we deal with a lot of times, is compaction. So soils that are devoid of life and devoid of biology, that are more compacted and they don't have the pore space and they don't have the structure, when water finally does hit, it just runs straight off.
Right.
So by creating that biological consortium and bringing the organic matter back to the soil and bringing the electrical charges back and the soil colloids and all the pore space, you're also just increasing the soil's ability to hold water and to manage it from a chemical aspect, from a biological aspect, from a mechanical aspect, and from an electrical aspect.
Absolutely.
In every way possible.
So an analogy to what you were just saying about, having a more friable soil, a soil that is more open, okay, not compacted. An analogy I'll use with people when I'm talking with them is, if you have a apartment complex and it's got hallways and it's got rec rooms and it's got a mechanical room and it's got a cafeteria and it's got apartments throughout the entire building. Think about all those avenues, those
It's like an anthill.
those areas where water could be held.
Right.
If the soil were built like an apartment complex, you got big things, big rooms, little rooms, hallways, conduits, channels, you name it. It's all there. It's also got the electrical. It's also got the air conditioning. It's got all that stuff going on, right? What happens when you take a wrecking ball to that apartment complex, that big apartment building?
There's no pockets to hold anything. There's no complexity of structure.
You lose the macro and micro pore space because it all collapses in on itself.
Right.
And what a lot of people forget is that there's something called gravity. And gravity is always pulling down on itself. So it's like, so you take a soil that is the microbial world. Once it's gone, the soil just falls in on itself because gravity's at work. Weathering is at work, so water starts to enter those pore spaces when it was still open, but it starts to fill up those pore spaces through weathering and whatnot. If you have this whole thing that collapses in on itself and gravity helps that process, how do you get it back open? There's only one way, and an aeration machine doesn't do it because an aerator only goes so deep. And
It quite literally just barely scratches the surface.
it's exactly
And
right.
it's mechanical. So it's only covering one and not even doing a very efficient job of it, but it's only covering one of those mechanical, chemical, biological, electrical, different aspects of soil structure and ways that we can remediate it that we're talking about.
And it's a temporary fix.
It's a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound.
Yeah. So if you have the biological communities working for you and you feed them, because if you have a team of workers, you want to make sure they're well fed and well rested. So that's what we're doing.
And then, and when you go back to, again, the soil compaction and the complexity of the soils, there's unlimited layers that can be unpacked here. But when you have a more friable soil, you not only have better water retention capacity, but you also have less of a barrier for the roots that are trying to reach out of the plant.
Oh, yes.
So your roots are going to dive deeper. They're going to sprawl farther. They're going to have access to groundwater that's, not just in the first inch. Whereas in a compacted soil, and we see it with trees in our tree care practice all the time, you end up with girdling roots. It looks like the tree never came out of the pot or the cage or the B&B ball and burlap that it was planted in.
Oh, do you remember, sorry to interrupt, but do you remember now whose lawn's been organic longer than any other lawn in Lancaster County?
Your mother's? My grandmother.
Right? So what happens when the tree gets cut down, the honey locust in the backyard?
Suckers for a quarter mile in every direction.
There's no lie.
Or at least 3 times the extent of the drip line.
Literally, honey locust sprouts were coming up 70 feet away from the trunk because the soil is that loose and friable and healthy that one honey locust tree had roots all the way out there. And so when the tree had to get cut down, the roots said, well, we've got to survive.
You're mowing suckers for the whole season. Yeah, because there's still sugar. There's still sugar stored in the roots. There's still energy. That's why you cut down trees and they resprout, whether it comes out of the same trunk, like I see with sycamore all the time, or whether it's coming out off of little feeders way out.
Oh, yeah.
And 3 times the extent of the drip line.
So to wrap all this up, in terms of how does HyphaLink Nourish play any role in that? Feed them and they will come. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Field of Dreams. By the way, we just got a customer 30 minutes away from the Field of Dreams yesterday.
That's cool.
But feed them and they will come. So does that mean that we have to load this bag up with biological inoculants? I argue no. I argue that even if you've lost 98% of your life in your soil, if you only have 2% left and you feed them, they will come. It may take longer because you have to rebuild that army of microbes, but you need to feed them and feed them well. And if you feed them well and you feed them often enough, again, not the plants, the microbes. If you feed them, they're just going to multiply and rebuild and repopulate.
And if you have unhealthy soils, if you have dirt, if you do have soils that are devoid of life, and you just go and you take a very expensive, concentrated bacterial or mycorrhizal fungal inoculant package, and you just throw that bacteria down on the soil and you say, live, but the food's not there for it,
right?
You're just throwing money on the ground. Nothing's going to happen. None of it's going to take. So what you're saying is you're much better erring on the side of feeding the native populations than trying to introduce inoculum, because your dollar goes farther, your material goes farther, you end up with greater success.
No question.
In the short term and the long term. Yep. So I think we've done a pretty decent job of summarizing how Nourish can act as a stress reducer in times of drought stress, or even potentially and alternatively as drought insurance. If you are just trying to have healthier soils and healthier plants in the event that you may or may not have a drought, because the Farmer's Almanac is pretty decent, but the weatherman isn't lately, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So an ounce of prevention obviously is always worth a pound of cure. And 2 pounds of Nourish is probably worth about 2 ounces of gold. When it's all said and done, Nourish is speaking not only to one targeted area specifically of plant vitality or soil vitality, it's talking to all areas of plant vitality and soil vitality. So at the end of the day, just like a whole food supplement is targeting all aspects of human health and vitality and metabolism and nutrition, so is Nourish for plants and soils, which is really what makes it so valuable, either as a standalone product or as the foundation for a larger program, depending on your requirements. Now, I kind of want to circle back just to summarize here. We've talked about drought stress. We've talked about value in a number of applications, no matter where in the green industry you stand, whether you're a homeowner, whether you're in agriculture, whether you have a big orchard or you're a veggie grower or anything in between. But another aspect of value that we've touched on, but we didn't really focus on yet, was our sizes, the rates, how far the product really goes, and how easy it is to ship. So this is a 2-pound bag of our all natural formulation. We have everything from 1-pounders, 2-pounders, 10s, 14, 20-pounders. This is a 20-pounder. 20 pounds of this. 2 pounds makes 50 to 100 gallons of finished spray mix, depending on your rates and your application. So 20 pounds does 10 times as much. It's making 500 to 1,000 gallons of finished spray mix, shipping flat rate to anywhere in the country.
Yeah,
so
Hawaii and whatever.
That and unlimited shelf life, again, until you get it wet and you actually decide to reach for it and mix it. So in my mind, that's kind of a no-brainer. Now, obviously, I'm biased. I don't think that there's really anything in the industry that can compete with this product from price point, value, what it does for the grower, how cheaply they can ship it, and how long it will last on the shelf. I really don't. And if you want to go bigger than that, if you want more, we have 44-pound bulk boxes. We'll do pallets. We'll do truckloads. Like really, the sky is the limit. It's just if you want to stay within the confines of the super cheap shipping and the USPS, you can go up to a 20-pound box, or you can buy as many 20-pound boxes as you would like.
Well, we're a volume direct entity. So typically the professional growers or the professional contractors, lawn care, golf courses, tree care, ag farmers, grain farmers, veggie farmers, vineyards, they're all requiring more of a volume per se than a homeowner would.
Yeah.
But even if an owner of a 100-acre estate just had a lot of turf and some orchard trees and so on and so forth, we'll give them the volume pricing because it is literally volume discounting. So if someone that owns a home says, I want a 44-pound box, I'm like, okay, well then you're going to pay for a 44-pound box and you're going to get the discount like any professional grower would get.
Absolutely.
So bulk is bulk and you deserve a discount. I wanted to speak a little bit to your, you slipped it in right at the beginning where a 2-pound bag will do anywhere from 50 to 100 gallons. Here's the place where I'd like to actually make a little bit more of a promise. And I'd like to say, generally speaking, and I would say the majority of the time, it's 2 pounds treats 100 gallons of tank mix. When you would use 2 pounds to treat 50 gallons, it's really the exception rather than the rule. And they're relatively few and far in between. And there's a reason why that is, for what it's worth. And remember how we talked about the affinity of the humic and fulvic molecules to water molecules? Well, with that said, there is a lot of farmers will say, well, what is it, a quart per acre, half gallon, meaning 2 quarts per acre, pint per acre. It's always some amount per acre. And I go, well, no, not with this product. I need you to leave that mentality behind, okay? Do me a favor, just leave that mentality behind. This product treats 100 gallons of water. This 2-pound bag right here treats 100 gallons of water. That's what I want you to wrap your head around. And so do that. And then if we need to give it a bump with your, adding a layer cake, so to speak, we're going to add a little bit of NPK to that. Now we add that NPK. Mm-hmm. That's a situation where you might do that. But I don't necessarily want you going out, because a lot of farmers will go out with 7 or 10 gallons of spray per acre.
Or 15 or 17, but it's not a lot.
So if you think that adding a lot more of this in a smaller volume of water so that you can put out 1 pound per acre is good, no, because it's actually going to have somewhat of an opposite effect if you use too much. It'll literally like freeze the plant like, and it won't move. It's like freeze frame. It just won't move. And I have actually done that before. So I took a plant that was wilting and dying. I was a young guy, and the old attitude is, if a little's good, a lot must be better. And so I fell right into that trap, like a lot of people have over their lifetimes. And I put too much on the plant, and the plant literally froze. It didn't just freeze for a day. It froze in the same point of growth, wilted down, ugly, wilted, but stayed green the whole way from June through to the fall. And when the winter hit, it dropped all its leaves because it was deciduous. And I thought, it's dead. And it came back the next year.
Better than ever, probably.
But, well, it came back. That's all I cared about. That's all I remember. That was a few years ago.
But so would you say then that just like with your tennis racket, there's a sweet spot for how much Nourish you want to run?
Yeah, so the sweet spot has to do with the dilution in water. And without going off the rails here and talking about things that aren't going to be worthwhile in this conversation, the fact of the matter is 2 pounds in 100 gallons is kind of the sweet spot. It doesn't mean that you can't go to 2 pounds in 50 gallons, but then you're not getting the frequency effect or the resonance effect. You're just simply putting down more biological foods. So it's about what effect you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And once you understand that, then you can advise people better. If you're just looking to hit the microbes over the head with a big basket of food, wham, okay, 2 pounds and 50 gallons. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to hurt anything.
If you want to do that, though, for that matter, there are other products that we have that you could go out with that might lower your cost and give you that benefit as well, like just humic acids.
Again, the diversity of the ingredients gives you the strength of biodiversity. And it'd be like all of us literally working together is going to be better than Eric Morgan working by himself, because everybody brings a gift to the table. And the microbial community or world is exactly the same. Each microbe brings a different gift to the table. So
it's like life. You can't do it alone.
Nope.
That's for sure. Yep. So, I mean, it kind of wraps us here. Do you have any closing thoughts, really, or should I just toe this one in?
I would say just give it a try.
I would agree with that. And we've said it before, and we're probably going to keep saying it, because the reason that we're hammering this product, we have other things to sell. And frankly, we have other things that we could maybe make more money on. The reason that Organic Approach has these products in the first place, and the reason that we take the time out of our day to be on the phone with you or make a video like this, is because this provides unbelievable value, the likes of which the world has never seen. So give it a shot. If there's any confusion, 2 pounds to 100 gallons is a really good running rate. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us here. Don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to send us an email. We hope you got something out of this. Every time that we talk about it, it helps us sharpen our tack, and every time that I get to have a conversation with my father, it helps me learn and it makes me better. And I think that's probably mutual, and that's what we're trying to do for you at the same time.
Yep.
And we can learn from you as well, and we do learn from you. When you take a product like this and you put it in your tank and you go out in the field and you say, this is what I love, this is what I didn't like so much. And that's how we ended up with 3 different formulations and like 12 different package sizes. Because this started out as 1 and now it's branching out. And if you try it, I think your business will probably branch out too, or your garden will grow, it will bloom, and you will see the fruits of your labor. So,
And yeah, but I just one last thing, and is I get a lot of people that kind of get overwhelmed by all the products that are out there. If you wanted some simplicity that offered you a lot of value in one product, so that your world was not so complicated, whether you're growing a small garden outside the back of your house, or you're growing a big victory garden, or you're growing giant pumpkins. We have a lot of giant pumpkin growers, you know, or a golf course, or whatever. I really strongly recommend that you just kick the tires and give the product a try, because if you do, it will simplify your life. And
if you don't want to make the commitment of a box or a truckload, that's okay, because we have the 1 pounder, we have the 2 pounder, and we have the small units that make your barriers to entry very low and very painless, even if for some reason you don't like it. But if that's the case, you're out of your mind.
And we'll be happy to ship a shipping container to Vietnam like we have, so we can do that too.
So thank you for your time from Organic Approach. Have a happy year.
Yep, take care. See ya.